I hope you have the outline. You're going to wish that you had it if you don't. And we are going to continue in Ecclesiastes 9. And let me see, title is Opportunities Do Not Necessarily Guarantee Success. I think we'll probably be finished with this study in maybe 2 weeks. If you'll notice, if you want to look ahead just a little bit, Ecclesiastes 10 is 20 verses long, so that'll probably be one study. And then Ecclesiastes 11 is only 10 verses long, and then Ecclesiastes 12 is only 14 verses long. So I had a pastor friend contacted me this morning through Facebook and messaged me, or maybe he posted it, and about preaching through Ecclesiastes. You have no idea how difficult it is to study Ecclesiastes unless you've tried to do so, and it's quite the challenge. So if you would, take your Bible to Ecclesiastes 10. If you'll notice, I have like the first 10 verses outlined on your page there, but I'm not going to look at those unless I have time. I'm going to pick it up at Ecclesiastes chapter 9, picking it up at verse 11. And so I titled it, Opportunities Do Not Necessarily Guarantee Success. So let's see what we have to read here. Look with me, if you would, then, at verses 11 and 12. And we're going to begin with this thought. Only God knows what tomorrow brings. Do you ever wish that you could know what the next day would be, and you could, when you make your plans, you could plan a week from now, and you could plan a month from now, and you could plan a year from now, or maybe you could even plan 5 years from now. But the reality is that we bear the burden of planning, but only God knows what tomorrow will bring. Let me invite you to look at these verses then, and I zipped through these. All right, here we are, verse 11. So you'll notice I've highlighted in yellow the important words that we're going to come back to. And so this is what Solomon, he is taking the role of the preacher here in verse 11. And so he writes, I returned, says the king, and I saw under the sun 5 things. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding. And then number 5, nor yet favor to men of skill. But then he ends it with this phrase, but time and chance happeneth to them all. So let's pick up the first thought here, all right? 5 abilities that do not promise success, the 5 that I highlighted in Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 11. So here's what we read, that the race, now you'll notice I put the amplification there, the running, the foot race, the competition, so literally a race, that the race is not to the swift. I'll put it in another way. The fastest runner is not always the one who will win the race. Now, there are many factors of why you might be the fastest runner, but you don't win the race. Unfortunately, in our culture now, sometimes it's the fact that somebody's cheating. Other times, it's the fact that the referees are cheating. But there's other things that enter into not winning the race, even though you're the fastest. It might be that you have trained and you have worked hard, but you know what? There might be someone just a wee bit faster than you. It may be a day that you got up and your stomach is bothering you or something else is ailing you, but you're off your game. And so Solomon, as he's writing then, he just writes simply that the race is not to the swift. So 5 abilities that do not promise success. You might be fast, but you might not be fast enough. Or you might be fast, but you can't outrun the consequences. I'm going to give you one example. You may even want to turn. I don't have it on the PowerPoint, but if you want to turn to 2 Samuel chapter 2, turn there just for a moment. 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 18 through 23. Let me give you the background. David is still fleeing from Solomon. Not Solomon, but from Saul. Saul has trusted great men of war who were serving him. But David does as well. So more and more, some of the great men of Israel have been coming to David's side. And in this passage here, you can begin in verse 18, of 2 Samuel 2, verse 18. And so here are three allies of David. And there were three sons of Zeruiah. Now these an ally of David there, Joab and Abishai and Asahel. And Asahel was as light of foot as a wild roe. So he's a fast runner. Now Asahel pursued after Abner. Now Abner is the general for Saul. Okay, so he is opposed to David. There was a time that David and Abner were men of war together, but because of the division of the kingdom with Saul and David fleeing him, they have been at odds. And so you've got this general named Abner. He is in many ways almost equal to David when it comes to being a man of war. Now, with that in mind, the pursuit that we find here, and so I'm going to pick it up in these words. And I hope I'm saying that right. Asahel pursued after Abner, and in going, he turned not to the right hand nor to the left from following Abner. So this friend and ally of David is pursuing David's enemy with the intent of killing him. Verse 20, Abner looked behind him, and he said, Art thou Asahel? And he answered, I am. And Abner, this great general of Saul, said to him, Turn thee aside to the right hand or to the left, and lay thee hold of one of the young men, and take thee his armor. But Asahel would not turn aside from following of him. So if you're going to go to war, at least put on the armor that you're going to have at least an opportunity of winning the war or winning the fight. But Abner said unto him, Turn thee aside from following me, wherefore should I smite thee to the ground? How then should I hold up my face to Joab thy brother? Howbeit he refused to turn aside, wherefore Abner with the hinder end of the spear smote him under the fifth rib, and that the spear came out behind him, and he fell down there, and he died in that same place. And it came to pass that as many as came to the place where Asahel fell down and died stood still. The bottom line is Asahel was fast, but he couldn't outrun a spear. So Abner had given him every opportunity to turn back, or put on somebody else's armor. But the fact is, the fastest are not always going to win. Here's another that we look at then. So speed does not guarantee success in a race. Now, the next one, nor the battle to the strong. All right, so 5 abilities that do not promise success. So you may be strong, but it's not a guarantee that you're going to win the battle. Here's the thought with that. Strength does not guarantee victory. There are many other factors that can come into play in the midst of a battle or in the midst of a war. Strength then does not guarantee victory. Anybody think of something that happened in David's life that would prove this point? David and Goliath, right? Goliath, this great giant, this man of war. And yet, guess what? He had all the strength to win the battle, but he was slaughtered. Why? Because David realized that the Lord was on his side. I'll give you a verse. I don't believe it's up here, but here it is. Psalm 33, verse 16. Here's one that will prove that point. There is no king saved by the multitude of a host. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. So the implication of the psalmist is this: if God is not on your side, it doesn't matter how mighty and how strong you are or how big your army is. If God is not on your side, you will certainly fail. Now, a third one, neither yet bread to the wise. Now, this is a little bit harder. Bread can be translated or indicate industry. Okay? And so what does not guarantee you success in your employment or in your industry? What does not guarantee you bread? The fruit of labor. And the answer that Solomon gives is wise. You can be wise, you can be shrewd, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to achieve success. So I better put it up here before I go to the next one. Can I move on? All right, here we go. And then he goes on and he says, now riches also are not guaranteed to men of understanding. Understanding, discernment, skill to teach and instruct. And so again, number 4 then, understanding. I'll put it in another way. Wisdom does not guarantee riches. You might be the who's who in your graduating class, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful in life. And I think many of us probably can think about somebody we went to high school with, somebody we went to college with, someone you knew growing up, and everybody thought that if anybody's going to be successful, it's going to be that person. And guess what? By choices and decisions that individual made in life, ended up not being the success that he thought it would be. So here's the thought: understanding, discernment does not promise wealth. Can I move on? All right, here we go. Nor yet favor to men of skill. Now, a man of skill, a man who has abilities, has talents. And so you might have abilities and you might have talents, but you may not be as successful as you would have thought you would have been, or as somebody else might have thought you would have been. And so the question we would ask ourselves is, what in the world does this have to do with anything? All right? So there are several things that come to mind when I go through this. One, it has been said that life is not fair. Right? It has been said that life has its injustices, its misunderstandings. That even though you plan and you plot, that all of a sudden something can take you, blindside you, and all of a sudden you falter. I wrote down a couple of thoughts that go with this. Sometimes skillful workers labor in obscurity. You know, there might be someone here, it might be somebody you know, they've got a lot of ability, and they've made other people financially successful, but they themselves end up laboring in obscurity, and it seems like they never enjoy the reward of their labor. I'll give you one example that comes to my mind when I was studying. Let's take Joseph. Joseph, the pride of his father, and yet he's sold into slavery by his brothers. He arrives in Egypt, and he ends up being the slave of a household of a man named Potiphar. He rises in Potiphar's house to success, only to be accused by Potiphar's wife, ultimately of attempting to attack her, to rape her, leaving behind his coat. Now, all of that was a lie. But the circumstances put Joseph in a position that he could have lost his life. Potiphar, I think, knowing his wife was a wild woman, I think that's why Joseph lives, besides the providence of God. And so Joseph ends up where? He ends up in prison. And then in prison, he ends up serving the other prisoners. Finally, 2 years later, the Pharaoh of Egypt has a dream. And the dream so shook him that he brought in all of his magicians to tell him what the dream meant. And then finally, was it the baker? The baker? The butler. The butler remembered, thank you. The butler remembered there was a guy in prison and he could interpret dreams. And so they bring Joseph out of the prison. He stands before Pharaoh. He interprets Pharaoh's dreams, and he ends up second in command over all of Egypt. Now, you can't plot and you can't plan that, right? That is the sovereignty of God working His will, His way, at His purpose. So, 5 abilities. You might have all the plots and all the plans to be successful. But there's one other thing, and that is time and chance happeneth to them all. So we've looked at 5 people that all had the ability, it would appear to have been extremely successful. But they had 2 things working against them. One is time, and the other was chance. Now, let's go through time for a moment. So Ecclesiastes 9, verse 11. Time, appointed time, an occasion of time. It could be my opinion. I didn't put it in there because it's only my opinion. But death. We have an expression, time was not on someone's side, right? Death is the ultimate interrupter of time. So, time and chance happeneth to them all. So let's deal with time. Here's a couple of verses then. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Ecclesiastes 8 and verse 5. Whoso keepeth the commandments shall feel no evil thing, and a wise man's heart discerneth both time and judgment. We could say then, you know what, that poor guy, time just wasn't on his side. Maybe in here even, for us, we're looking at life and we're thinking, I'm running out of time. I don't know if you're looking at that. You look back over the years and you look at how many years have passed and you think, man, where did time go? Did you ever, have you, I'm sure you've all done it. You've looked at pictures of your family and then pictures of yourself. And you look at the picture where you are today. Then you look at the picture where you were 10 years ago. You look at the picture where you were 20 years ago. And you ask yourself, what happened? Time. Here's another, I think, on time. To every purpose there is time and judgment. Therefore the misery of man is great upon him. Do you value time more now than you did 20 years ago? 10 years ago? The time is fleeting. And I used to hear the old folks say that, and I've learned it is indeed the passing of time. Now, let's talk about chance, because most of us have an issue with this word. Time and chance were not on the side of the runner. They were not on the side of the industrious. They were not on the side of the wise. They were not on the side of the skill, because time interrupted and chance. Now, I put up here this idea of chance. The thought to explain that a little bit would be this. Let me catch up with it. Now I didn't put it in here. I put occurrence, external event, misfortune. We would have another word as believers that we would put for chance. You know what it would be? Providence. Thank you. Providence. All right, now let's talk about chance. Can you think of any phrases that we might have in our language that would be chance, how the world would look at chance? Huh?
Your destiny.
Destiny. It wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be. How about blind luck? Right? The luck of the Irish. I was going to say the luck of the draw, the luck of the Irish. Let me give you another thought. Happening to be in the right place at the right time, or in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Possibility or probabilities. And so here's the question. For the believer whose faith and trust is in the Lord, who is sovereign and providential in His oversight and His dealings with us, do we believe in chance? All right, let me give you a verse. All right, here's one. James 4:13 and 14. Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year and buy and sell and get and gain. Nothing wrong with that, right? Planning our work, working our plan. Verse 14. Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow. Now, if we look at life through chance, we could look at life through a half full glass or a half-empty glass. We can look at life and we can say, why even bother to get out of bed? Because it doesn't matter how hard I work, I still end up in the same place year after year after year. Or somebody would say, I just can't get a break. All of those are indicative of an idea of chance. I think I have a couple of verses. Well, let me give you the verses and then maybe you'll want to chime in. Psalm 91 verse 10, if we're going to talk about providence of God and the fact that He's sovereign, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. Now, does that mean, as God's people, does that mean that bad things don't happen to good people? Do bad things happen to good people? Absolutely. But do evil things happen to good people? Now let's stop. Think about it. There shall no evil befall thee. And yet we know that troubles and trials, sorrows and sickness, and even death eventually comes. So how can the psalmist say, there shall no evil befall thee? And the answer is because his confidence was in the fact that God is sovereign. So although He allows things to impact our lives, and even things that hurt us, and even things that are bad, God never intends anything evil towards His people. Even if we go through suffering, it's not that God's intent is anything less than all things work together for good. Why? To them that love God. Here's another. Proverbs 12:21. There shall no evil happen to the just, but the wicked shall be filled with mischief. So from the world, this idea of chance, from the world, they do not have the promise of the shadow of God's mercies and God's compassions and God's grace. Now, for you and me, we have the shadow of God's grace, but allowed within that are those things that poke us, promote us, urge us, that spawn spiritual growth in our life, perhaps in a way that other things would not. Going through life on an easy roller coaster where there's ups and there's downs and not expect that there's going to be downs is not a reality. Yeah.
It also,
Speak up loud enough so your voice carries.
it also involves position and perspective. At the beginning of Psalm 91, it prefaces, with he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. So when we are near God, in His secret place, we are shadowed. So as we go throughout life, naturally, things come our way that look terrible. But when we understand our position with Him, that we are shadowed by His presence, we see those things through the lens of His presence. We look at it
And His promises.
and His promises, absolutely. So it changes our perspective because our position is so near or so close to Him that our perspective is not the same as somebody who's just lackadaisical, walking along day to day, and oh, this happened, oh my. No, we're near to the Lord. He allows what He allows. We're close to Him.
So our faith and confidence is in His sovereign care, His oversight of us. Somebody else on this point? Anyone? Have you ever had anything bad happen to you at work? And yet, sometimes those things that happen push us and force us not only to reckon with God in our relationship with Him, but also we often find that they can become springboards to something even greater. Amen? So you go through the hard time, but it's not evil. You go through the hard time and you remember, well, the Bible says there's no evil is going to happen to the just. And if I'm in a right standing, as Sheila was saying, with the Lord, then I can be confident. It doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. You know, your mother or father ever say to you, "No, son, this is going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt me." You know, and you're thinking as a kid, there is no way. And then when you become a parent, guess what? You learn the saying. All right, moving on. Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 12. Carrying on the same thing here. For man also knoweth not his what? Time. Or we could say, perhaps it is his death even. As the fishes that are taken in an evil net, and if you're a fish, that's an evil net, and as the birds that are caught in the snare, so are the sons of men snared in an evil time, when it falleth suddenly upon them. Now, I think on your outline, I actually have a broadening of that, but here's the thought with verse 12, and it's that we cannot know when trouble will come. The fishes and the birds do not know when they're going to get caught in a net or a snare. We think, well, that's silly. Yeah, but you given the culture, you grasp, okay, it's simple enough that everybody understood exactly what he was talking about. And then troubles come, I think the bottom line is when we least expect it. For man also knoweth not his time. So most of us did not get out of bed today and say, I'm going to go looking for trouble. Right? Now, I've met people like that. You run into them, you're thinking, man, all they're doing is looking for trouble. And then you might even say when you were younger, and I'm about to give it to them. You know, I'm going to give them their wish for trouble. But we don't know what a day will bring. Here's a thought then. About the fishes. Fish and birds do not know when they might get caught in a net or a snare. And then I'm going to keep moving. So are the sons of men snared in an evil time when it falleth suddenly upon them. The second thought with that, troubles come when men least expect them. In fact, if we knew that troubles was coming down a certain road or a path that we were taking, we would take another road. Either that or we would be bound and determined for heartache and sorrow, or as the hee-haw used to say, gloom and despair and agony on me. All right, moving on. James 4:15, ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. So we realize that we make our plans, which is right and it's wise, and we say, you know, if the Lord will. Ultimately, we visit the Lord in the Garden of the Gethsemane on the night that he was betrayed, and he prays to the Lord, Lord, take this cup of suffering from me. And then he ultimately says, not my will, but what? But thy will be done. God has a will, God has a plan for our lives, and we should trust him. Verse 16 and 17, but now ye rejoice in your boasting, also rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do evil and doeth it not, to him it is sin. So let us make a plan for today that we're going to do God's will and we're going to honor him. I need to rush on or I'm not going to finish this, and I don't want to be in that position. Here's another then, verses 13 through 18. Now this is very interesting. As I was studying it, I wrote out on my notes a parable, and I put a question mark because it reads like a parable. So I invite you to look at it. Opportunities do not guarantee success. So here we go. It's a parable or a tale of a little city and a poor wise man. So Solomon is going to tell a story. You follow as I work through this. Ecclesiastes 9, 13 through 15. Now, Solomon says, this wisdom have I seen also out of the sun, and it seemed great unto me. Now he tells a story. There was a little city, and a few men within the little city. And there came a great king against it, and besieged it, and built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city, and yet no man delivered that same, or remembered rather, that same poor man. So let me give you the outline to fill it in. All right, here's the first thought. The little city was besieged by a great king. That's the setting. Being a little city, I would think it had a little wall. And so here's a great king. Now we could personify this in many ways. We could say, well, the great king was the devil, and he was besieging this. Let's not go into that. Let's just say it's a little city with a great king that is coming to besiege it. Another that goes with that then. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and so we have a poor wise man who delivered the city, but he was soon forgotten. Now, here's the question. So you got a few men in a little city, and a great king that is besieging it. They don't know what they're going to do because this great king is building his bulwarks against the city so that he can conquer it and overtake it. And so then we read, though, that the poor wise man, he by his wisdom delivered the city. So what was it that the poor wise man had that nobody else had in the city? And the answer is, he had wisdom. Right? He had wisdom. Now I'm going to keep moving. And yet we read in verse 15, and yet no man remembered that same poor man. So what did the wise man have that he saved the city? The answer is, he had wisdom. And yet, like typical of humanity, they're soon forgotten. You know, one of the things about America over the years, and I think it's still true, I read somewhere that Joe Biden went somewhere and to some kind of meeting. Hopefully he had somebody with him, but he flew back on U.S. Air or something like that. He flew back on a regular airline. And you think, he probably had the Secret Service. We know he would have. But the glory days of the limousines and Air Force One, those days are gone. And such it is, the greatness of America is, you could be at the pinnacle of power, and then you change offices, and all of a sudden you become a commoner. At least that's the way that it should be. And apparently Joe Biden would not give him the money to be able to get a private jet and fly where he wanted to with some of that Chinese money. But never mind, let's move on. Now, I'll give you another thought because I want to get through this. 16 and 17, Solomon observed that wisdom is better than. Now, if you've read the Proverbs, most of you have, the Proverbs are full of comparisons. Better than. This is better than. And so it is in verse 16 and verse 17. So let's look at verse 16 and 17. Then said I, wisdom. That's the capacity to understand, or a skill from understanding. Wisdom is better, more desirable than strength. Now, we've already read that earlier. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Why? Because he's a poor man. Even though he had the wisdom to save the city had no gratitude for him. Why? Because it's a poor wise man. All right? Verse 17. We go on then. The words of wise men are heard in quiet, more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. And so it is that another thought then that will go with that, I'm going to add to it, verse 18. So wisdom is better than strength, and wise words spoken in quiet are going to be of greater value than the cry of a fool. Verse 18, wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. And so the second thought then, wisdom is not only better than strength, wisdom is better than the weapons of war. There's no doubt that the United States has the arsenal and is still the most powerful nation in the world. But our problem is, more often than not, we are ruled by fools, right? And we could cite many different things that shows just how foolish we are. For instance, how foolish can we be to have politicians that put us $37 trillion in debt? How foolish is that? Because we know that the more they're printing the dollars, the less value our dollars have. And we sit back and we watch the foolishness of men that are supposed to be wiser than we. And I don't know if you do it. One of the wonderful things about YouTube now is that you can go on and you can watch some of the Senate hearings or some of the committee hearings in the House of Representatives. And you sit there and you listen and you think, how in the world did we end up with that Crockett woman from Texas? Who put her in there? Or how in the world did Pelosi get back into office and she can hardly put a sentence together? We could go on, and we won't even talk about who was just president and had the code button for our arsenal. How in the world did we get into that? You know why? Because the wisdom of poor wise men are not valued in our culture. What is valued are the words and the verbosity of fools. And sadly, that's what we have reigning and ruling over us. Well, I want to close with this, the folly of little sins, because as we were studying through this, you'll notice in verse 18, so it says, wisdom is better than weapons of war. And then it says, and one sinner destroyeth much good. How many sinners does it take to ruin something that is good? And the answer is, it only takes one. Whether it is a church, it is a college, it is your place of employment, where you work. It only takes one fool to just totally destroy everything. Never underestimate the damage that one fool can cause, right? And so I'm going to keep reading because I think verse 1 of chapter 10 ties in with this. So we continue then. Verse 1 of chapter 10. Dead flies cause the ointment or the oil or the perfume of the apothecary, which is basically a clay vessel with fragrant ointment in it, to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly him that is a reputation for wisdom and honor. Let me give you, I think I have a couple of thoughts. No, I don't. All right. So let me walk you through this here then. One sinner destroyeth much good. Let's go back. The first man, Adam. Did he destroy much good? Huh? Absolutely. Let me give you a verse. Romans 5:12. Wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin is so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Romans 5:15. But not as the offense, so also is a free gift. For if through the offense of one many be dead, much more the grace of God. So one sinner can destroy much. Give you one other example. Israel has crossed, we're getting to this in the devotional, they've crossed the Jordan River. The first obstacle is going to be the city of Jericho. And there was somebody that decided that he wanted a Babylonian garment for whatever reason, as well as the gold and the silver. And his name was? Who? Achan. You ever wonder with Achan, now how foolish can you be? You're living among the Hebrews, and you, Achan, decided to take it's one thing to take the gold and the silver, but to take a Babylonian garment, that's like going to the fanciest, what would it be, Fifth Avenue? Is that where the big shops are? So you're on Fifth Avenue and you go into a store and you buy the fanciest dress or the fanciest suit you can wear. What are the chances that somebody in Israel is going to notice that you're sporting a Babylonian garment? I mean, where are you going to wear it, right? But they did not know it because, remember, he dug a hole and he hid it in his tent. However, there was someone that knew that he had sinned, and that was the Lord. And so they go on to the next little village to conquer that little village, and they end up retreating in humiliation because the Lord wasn't with them. The thought then, one sinner destroyeth much good. The problem, and I will close with this, the problem that churches have, that schools have, that companies, corporations have, is the toleration of one sinner. because it only takes one to ruin the whole. That brings us to chapter 10 and verse 1. I think dead flies is a symbol or a type of sin. So you have this wonderful clay ointment of perfume, but somehow you ended up with the dead fly in it. And the dead fly or flies are decaying. And when you go to decide you're going to put a little fragrance on yourself to step out into town or to go to church or whatever, all of a sudden you realize the perfume is rotten. It smells horrible. Why? Because it only took a few dead flies to ruin the whole. The closing lesson with this is this. Go back to the poor little wise man. His wisdom was rejected because he was a poor little wise man. However, the rejection of wisdom is a catalyst ultimately for disaster. Because when you reject wisdom and righteousness, you invariably are going to embrace sin and sinner. So you and I should be what? Intolerant of one little sin in our lives, as well as intolerant of sin in our homes, in our families, in our church, and any other corporation or organization that we are a part of.